acting city manager for the city of Lake Worth. And thank you very much. It's really an honor to have everybody come out tonight to talk about this important issue. We would first like to bring up our mayor, Pam Triello, who has some opening comments and some introductions. And if you'll welcome her to the stage.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? I want to welcome you to the City of Lake Worth's 2020 presentation. And I also, before we get started, want to say thank you to the Lake Worth Playhouse for their hospitality and hosting this event here in this most beautiful, historic, gorgeous playhouse that we have right here in the city of Lake Worth. Thank you, guys. By now I'm sure you know that this Tuesday, August 26th, there's an election. And along with primaries, it'll also feature the Lake Worth 2020 bond issue. And the process of coming up with a plan is over 2 years in the making. And I want to discuss this just a little bit before we get started with the city's presentation. It all started at a public visioning session we had with staff during the budget process in late 2011-2012. It was the Commission's time to discuss their priorities while dealing with the budget. During the course of the conversation, I happened to share a PowerPoint presentation that I took pictures with my camera and went throughout the city. And this presentation highlighted a community where pets ran wild in the grass, children played in the dirt, or walked from school in the middle of poorly constructed streets. I unveiled that these third world conditions existed just blocks from our downtown, right here in our beloved Lake Worth. It was our belief that as your mayor and commission, it was our job to provide basic infrastructure and public safety measures for the entire city, a responsibility that has been sorely neglected for decades. In the process of doing these investigations, we also happened to find $700,000 in community development block grant funds that hadn't been spent since 2006. And we, of course, acted swiftly to be sure not to lose those ignored funds. 10th Avenue South is about to break ground, and there are also greenway projects on additional roadways that will enhance the quality of life for many south of downtown neighborhoods. These projects are all underway right now, and they are not part of the 2020 bond issue. You see, the infrastructure discussion prompted the Commission to explore the roadway and infrastructure conditions for the entire city so we could start making plans for improvements. As you know, our streets and sidewalks are failing at a rapid pace, and over the last year especially, you've called on me to step up and do something about it. So what did? We called in professionals that actually took core samples of the road base. They analyzed the entire city from below the ground up and rated it to decipher if, and inevitably when, it would fail. Staff is going to have more details on this in a moment, but as you can imagine, the results were not what I had hoped for. Since then, your commission has been knocking down the doors of every politician and organization that represents us, from meeting with the White House Secretary of Transportation, Anthony Fox, to congressmen and senators from Washington to Tallahassee. And I have even met with the governor 3 times, 2 times here in our city, and hosted the lieutenant governor a week ago, and actually took him on a tour of our city to see things firsthand and all of our many challenges. They believe that for the first time in decades, we finally have professional, shovel-ready plans that can help us get funding to supplement our needs. We deserve help, and we should get it. And your commission is fighting hard to make sure that we get that help. Each bit of assistance that we receive from the state or federal government will reduce our financial obligation. That's why we created 3 separate bond issuances. If we don't need them, We don't borrow. In addition, as our property values rise and new investment continues, we have the ability to lower our millage rate and the taxes to offset the bond. When staff first presented their ideas for 2020, oh, that was interesting. They included a wish list of things the city needed and wanted to the tune of almost $200 million. Yeah, it'd be nice to have all those things, but your commission asked them to scale this back to only the real hardcore necessities for infrastructure and public safety, including, though, lighting, fire hydrants, pedestrian and traffic calming projects that are unique to each and every neighborhood, many of which were promised for years, but they never were realized. The result of all of this work is Lake Worth 2020. City staff has done an incredible job of creating plans to not only bring us up to modern day standards, but prepare us for future growth. The most important aspect of the plan is that it coordinates all necessary water, sewer, and street projects at the same time together to reduce redundancy and save the city millions. Do it once, do it right. Now, Lake Worth 2020 is not the be-all and end-all plan for what's wrong with our city. It's part of a multi-pronged approach designed to remedy infrastructure neglect. Now, the overall strategy your commission and staff have been creating and implementing over the last 2 years is designed to help the city reach its full potential while removing the existing disincentives, including infrastructure. By encouraging new investment, both residential and commercial, the tax base widens, services can now be funded properly, and the general fund gets weaned off the electric utilities. Successes include a recently passed law to lower our electric rates until we reach rate parity with FP&L. Economic incentive rates for new companies that bring in at least 10 new jobs to the city. Over 40 code enforcement ordinances just took effect in January to help us clean up slum and blight and are starting to work. Demolition is almost underway on 18 of the 200 problem properties we can finally address because of these new ordinances. Our new land development regulations are already lowering new investment to town, including the revitalization of the Gulfstream Hotel and over $50 million of permitted projects with lots more on the way. Crime task forces are working, and contract negotiations led us to a $700,000 savings with Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. Lake Worth was the only city in Palm Beach County to negotiate a rate reduction. Now, despite these successes, the truth of the circumstances remained. While the rest of the county was growing and modernizing its systems and infrastructure, we weren't. When I moved to South Florida 24 short years ago, downtown West Palm Beach and Delray Beach were crime-ridden, drug-infested, pothole-laden, downtrodden communities that needed investment to help them turn around. Well, our city is uniquely different, and we like it that way. We still have the same challenges. Nobody wants to pay more money. No one, not ever. Whether you vote for or against this bond issue, I am always on our side, and this commission will continue to do everything possible to get us back into the black financially speaking, remove the disincentives to being a part of our beautiful city, and fixing our infrastructure one pothole at a time if that's what you decide. You asked the city to come up with a plan, and we did. It's the first time the city has ever had one. The last thing I want to leave you with is this. There are political PACs arguing both sides of this issue, and misinformation is rampant. One homeowner actually told me that they went to Zillow to get the market value of their house to figure out the payment they might be making for the bond. And I had to stop them right there and tell them that the market value has nothing to do with this at all. It's based on the Palm Beach County tax appraiser's taxable value, and it can be found on their website. I hope that's why you're all here tonight, for the facts. Please fill out a card to have your questions answered, and staff will do everything possible to explain the details. And if you have more questions after tonight or know of someone who couldn't be here, there's another informational meeting tomorrow at 5 p.m. at First Congregational Church, and another from noon to 3 on Sunday at the Wembley Gym on Wingfield Street. All of these meetings are designed to help you make an informed decision based on truthful facts to decide the future for you and your loved ones. You have that control. Yes or no. Know the facts, the repercussions, and the real plans. Through the next few days, oh my, I encourage everyone, please, 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 be respectful and kind to one another. Whatever happens, we have a lot of work to do, and it always works better when we do it together. Thank you so much. At this time, it's my pleasure to reintroduce the City Manager, Michael Bornstein.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I could probably just end there with the presentation. I'd like to make some introductions of some special guests. We have some elected officials here from our commission. Our Vice Mayor, Scott Maxwell. Our District 2 Commissioner, Christopher McBoy. District 4 Commissioner, John Zerdy. And Commissioner Amoroso had a previously scheduled trip, and he sends his regards. Behind me, this nefarious group, this is my staff, and I love them dearly. Most of us have been with the city less than 3 years, and we have a really great team. I'll start with our attorney. This is Glenn Torsivia. He works for the firm of Torsivia. This is Steve Carr. Steve Carr is also a resident. Steve Carr is our interim finance director emeritus. I keep giving him titles. We have Larry Johnson, who's been with us about a year now. He runs the water and utilities department. And Jamie Brown, our public services director. Everybody knows meetings. I also want to put in a plug for the Playhouse here. This is a spectacular facility. Architecturally, historically, and culturally, this is an important part of the city. The performing arts are a big part of our scene as an arts community. And if you've never seen a play here, I encourage you to get some literature. They have season memberships. They have independent films next door. It's just an incredible gym for us. And it runs on community support. So they're letting us use this facility free of charge tonight. However, they're having to pay for the lights and things to keep this open for us at no charge to the city. So if you feel so inclined, there's a donation box outside in the lobby, or become a season ticket holder. I'm sure Stephanie Smith would love to talk to you about that. Yes. All right, let's get into why you came here. Now this is going to be interesting because I don't have a clicker for the PowerPoint, and it's long distance up there. I see Dolores Key, our Economic Development Director, is in the box. Hey Dolores, can you see me? I'm going to give her the hi sign. It's not that I'm being rude, I'm just telling her to flip the slides. Okay. That was funny, wasn't it? This is what you're going to be seeing when you go to vote on the 26th. And at the end of the ballot is this language here. And it says, approval of the Lake Worth 2020 bonds for public infrastructure projects within the city. Shall the city of Lake Worth be authorized to issue bonds to acquire and improve roadway, sidewalk, street light, streetscape, drainage, and water and sewer facilities located within the city in one or more series not exceeding a total principal amount of $63.5 million, payable from an annual ad valorem tax maturing not later than 30 days from the date of each issuance. 30 years. What did I say? Boy, that was a quick payback. I'm sorry. I had pasta before I came. 30 years from the date of each issuance and bearing interest at a rate not exceeding the maximum legal rate for bonds and against bonds. It's language we are restricted by the state of Florida to 75 words or less. And this is the restricting language in the bond, ballot language, and this is what the bond is for. Well, what is Lake Worth 2020? Hey, that was kind of lovely. If you can see up there, and if you haven't already seen, I would be surprised, this red-lined map. It's been mailed out, it was in your utility bills, and we continue to show it to people. And it represents Lake Worth 2020 because Lake Worth 2020 is a comprehensive improvement program. It repaves 71.5 miles of roadway. It includes approximately 73% of all our city-owned streets. It also includes coordinating, as the mayor said, other infrastructure needs such as new fire hydrants, drainage improvements, sidewalks, street lighting, and other needs in the community. But at the core, if you look at this map, this is what Lake Worth 2020 and the money is intended to do, is to go into these streets. Now, how does that break down out of the $63 million? The biggest chunk of the general obligation bonds, if this is approved, go into basic road work. Almost $40 million, $39,724,754 is designated for that road work. And all those different streets have different needs, which I'll get into in just a moment. The next largest category of funding out of that is something that's important to the city, and that's drainage. Almost $15 million worth of drainage improvements across the city. That would include exfiltration trenches and trying to improve some of the drainage problems that we consistently have had. The next category is labeled neighborhood enhancements at $3.2 million, which represents $800,000 for each of the 4 districts of the city. That would go for neighborhood enhancements that would include things like traffic calming, upgrades to landscaping, street lighting, things that the communities within those 4 districts will tell us through a process of going out into the community and determining what each area wants. Because as we know, while we're a city and we're all one, each area of the city, each neighborhood has a different set of needs and concerns. And we wanted to be flexible in that. But it is limited to things within the right-of-way as spelled out in the ballot language. The next amount is $2.4 million, which goes to affect some water and sewer improvements in some of the projects that initially started in year 1. And then finally, we have project management. We are going to contract out the project management while my staff and the city staff are quite capable. And in the past, we haven't always had the best experience with doing construction projects. This is something that we felt was important to have a firm that oversaw everything from the design through the bid process, the construction and field inspections, all the way to closeout, and constantly reporting this information back to the mayor, the commission, and the public, and overseeing that process while staff is integrated in all those steps. And then lastly, there is a cost to borrow this much money, and the transaction cost is $900,000. That makes up the pie of really where the general obligation bond money would be spent. Well, let's talk a little bit about the road work. And this is a common sight, and if you drove here on some of the streets, you had to dodge back and forth, or you had to replace a tire, or we've all had the horror stories with the roads. I can't tell you why, but for many years back, the city stopped or didn't invest in the roadway infrastructure. And you do not get a pass on infrastructure. It is an important part of what makes a city and a community. And if you're not constantly repairing, maintaining, rebuilding, and replacing when it's worn out, it's deteriorating. And what we do right now is we have enough money in the general fund to put a few $100,000 a year into actually patching this road work. And that's what you see. You see a patchwork of pothole filling. Pothole filling is not a permanent solution. It is temporary. My staff knows that. When they go out there and cut that section out and put it in, they're shaking their heads because they're going, we're going to be back here. And that's what happens when you don't take care of the infrastructure. And we haven't done a good job of it here. So what we did was the commission and the mayor authorized an engineering study. And using the latest technology, if you can see the truck on the screen, they have all kinds of sensors and radar and LiDAR, and they drove every mile of the city-owned road network. And they took that data and analyzed it empirically through observation, through the data they had, and they basically were looking for how to rank and grade the streets of the city. That data was gathered along with some samples that we took. We had 100 core samples, and if you've ever seen, it's kind of like a hole drill. They went in the pavement, and they drilled a hole, and they pulled a plug out to see if what we were seeing on the surface of the road was matching what we saw underneath the road. In many cases, it was a little worse, but what we were finding was the road base, the crushed lime rock that you normally put in a good road should be about 8 to 12 inches. In many cases, it's non-existent. The asphalt, a good 3 inches would be ideal. You know, it's a skim coat. Why it was built that way, nobody knows. Nobody could probably ever find out going back. It just was. And unfortunately, what you see is the potholes resulting from that. So we took that, and that was cross-referenced with the data that we got from the electronic equipment and the engineering. And they have what's called a pavement condition index. And I know you can't read that, but basically, it's a rating system, our PCI, pavement condition index, that goes from 0 to 100. 0, obviously, there was probably never a road there. All the way up through 100, which means it's a perfectly brand new road. And they took, we're going to flip through 6 slides real quick because you really can't read that. They took all the roads, analyzed them, gave them a ranking, and that is the ranking of all the streets in the city. Okay? And they're assigned a number based on their condition. That ranking makes a lot of sense when you're looking to do a road program. Okay? It's empirical data, it's examined by engineers, it is what it is. What's unique about Lake Worth 2020 for our situation is there were pre-existing studies that had been done. For example, in 2005, we had a utilities water distribution modeling report. That was a mouthful. And basically what this report said was, there are parts of this city that the water lines are not sufficient, either in size or in placement, to supply enough water pressure. Now, that affects a lot of things that you might be unhappy about when you deal with turning on your faucet, you can't take a shower. But more importantly, it also meant that fire hydrants were missing throughout the city because there wasn't enough water and it was just never installed. We were missing 136 fire hydrants, which affect about 2,700 properties. And this is work that was identified in 2005 that the Water Utility Department was working towards getting done, fixing the things underneath the roads. So if you know that you've got utility work that you have to do, water, sewer, drainage, doesn't it make sense then to take that data that you've got on the road system and push them together to create one plan so that, as the mayor said in her speech, you do it right, you fix it once and you fix it right. Instead of going back and forth and doing this project, tear up the road, and this project, tear up the road, and patch it. Pushing them together makes a lot of sense, and that coordination is one of the key interesting things about the Lake Worth 2020 plan. Fix it once, fix it right. So, how do you pay for something like this? That's the big question in a lot of ways, isn't it? And that's what this ballot issue is really about. Cities and counties use general obligation bonds. That's how they pay for assets that have a value and a long life. And it's a commonly used tool to borrow money to build these things. This sheet here, and I'll walk you through it, talks about what we're proposing in the general obligation bond. General obligation bonds are very different from any other kind of debt the city can incur. And the mayor and commission talked about this. It's one of the most democratic of debt. It's because it requires the citizens in the city to actually vote to approve it or disapprove it. There are other kinds of debt that we have, and in the general fund, I want to make it clear, the general fund where we're talking about, there is no debt currently. There has been debt issued in the utility funds, and the utility funds are very much like a business. The water utility, for example, makes and sells water. They get a revenue. You can borrow against that revenue, and that debt is used to build new facilities. That's been approved in the city, and the reverse osmosis plant is an example of those kinds of borrowing activities. This is based on a 30-year financing of each of these borrowings, and it also assumes a 4% annual assessed valuation increase of the taxable value of the city's property. And I'll talk about that a little more, so if there's any confusion, I want to clear that up. But let me go through the borrowings here. Issuance 1, which would be the first set of bonds that, if this is approved, we would want to borrow, will do the first 2 years of projects, which will cost $28 million in bond proceeds. The issuance date would be June of 2015, and the debt payment, what it would take to pay that borrowing back, would be $1.945 million a year. Now, if you take the valuation of the city, the taxable valuation, and you multiply that times 1.64 mils, that is what would appear on the tax bill for you. That would generate the payment. In year 3, the second issuance, to do the next $14.3 million worth of projects, the same June date, but in 2017, we would borrow that money. The debt payment for that would be just over $1 million a year. So that would combine with the first borrowing, and the millage rate would then go to 2.3 mils total to make both those payments now going out. And last year, the final borrowing would be for $20 million. In June of 2019, it would be issued, and the payment is estimated to be at $1.4 million a year. And that would add to what has already been borrowed, and the millage rate then would move up to 3.14 mils on your taxable valuation. And again, I want to stress, this is based on a 4% annual assessed valuation increase of all the taxable property in our city. Now, if anybody ever had any questions about millage, assessed value, it's very confusing. Unless you really take a lot of time to look at your tax bill and understand this, you can kind of forget about it, because you might make your mortgage payment and principal and interest and tax and everything just goes in a check and you don't think about it. So let me just catch you up and remind you what these terms mean. Millage, a mill, what is it? It's a tax rate that local governments, cities, use to generate property taxes or ad valorem taxes. 1 mil equals $1 for every $1,000 in taxable valuation. Okay? So if you have a taxable valuation of $1,000, you're on the book, it would be $1.64 for the first borrowing. It would go up to $2.30 and $3.14. If you have a taxable valuation of $10,000, it would go to $16.40, $23, and $31.40 in the third borrowing. And if you're lucky enough to have a valuation of $100,000, it would be $164 for that tax